The trouble is Spotify's crazy. The trouble is it stinks. The trouble is Spotify's lazy. The trouble is it drinks. The trouble is it's growing. The trouble is it's grown. Gee whiz, music biz, we've got troubles of our own. That's my weird rewriting of G. Officer Krupke from the musical West Side Story. And in it, there's these juvenile delinquents, these kid criminals who are being kind of diagnosed by all the authority figures in their lives. And I think it's a pretty good place to begin a discussion about Spotify, because in that song, everyone's got a different opinion about what's wrong with these delinquent kids. The cop thinks the judge should send them to jail. The judge is like, no, this isn't a punitive issue. I should send them to a psychologist. And then the analyst gets them and is like, no, this isn't about their childhood trauma. They actually just need a social worker to step in and get them some social services and maybe a sense of purpose, a job. And the social worker's like, no, these are bad kids. I can't do anything about this. They need to go to jail, bringing it back to the judge. Basically, everyone's got their own take, their own angle on what the problem is. None of them are going to do anything about it themselves. They throw their hands up in the air and they say, we got problems of our own. It's a little bit like our analysis of Spotify, right? Everyone's got their own take and their own grievance. So in this episode, we're going to take an honest look at Spotify. The ugly, the bad, and yes, the good. This is the truth about Spotify. Let's get into it. What's up? Hello, welcome to Scratch Track, brought to you this week and every week by Demo, the best place to be if you're a busy musician juggling a lot of adult responsibilities in your life and you have precious few moments in your day to do things like promote your music and manage your music career, and yet you're making the best music of your life. You want it to get out there and reach the right audience. You want to build that audience without having to chase trends, go broke, or burn out. If that sounds like you, well, Demo is the place to be. Get started at musicdemo.org. All right, so it's that time again, that sort of perennial time when everyone is pissed at Spotify. A lot of artists are leaving for slightly different reasons than in the past, but this happens every few years. There's an outrage. It seems to become the trending thing to leave Spotify. So I thought it'd be as good a time as any to get into the real truth about Spotify, some of the things that they do well, some of the things that is maybe they're critiqued for that is unfair, and of course, a lot of the bad things they're doing. So as artists are asking themselves, hey, should I leave Spotify? And some of my friends are calling me saying, should I leave Spotify? I thought, let's take a look. This is a sort of a ritual at this point. Every few years, there's some new wave of protest. Very early on, it was about streaming in general. The Beatles and Pink Floyd and Led Zeppelin were very late to joining Spotify in kind of protest of streaming in general. After that, there was complaints about low payouts, and Taylor Swift left. She then came back. At some point, Spotify made a deal with Joe Rogan, and that pissed a lot of people off. I think Neil Young and Joni Mitchell left then. Since then, Daniel Ek has said some kind of clumsy things. He said content creation is free, and artists were really pissed because they're like, it's not free for me. I pay for gear and my own time, recording time and all that. And honestly, I thought that one was taken a little bit out of context, because what I thought he was really saying is not that you can't spend money to make your art, but that you no longer need to. The barrier to entry is pretty much nearly zero. Like anyone with a phone now can make an album for free and put it up on Spotify. I think that was the trend he was referencing. Again, could he have used better language? Sure. More recently, there's been a lot of concern over AI music on the platform. There's that band, The Velvet Sundown, that's been getting a lot of scrutiny. Are they real? Are they fake? If they're fake, why hasn't Spotify pulled them? And then most recently is this investment Daniel Ek made in BattleTech technology, which has outraged a lot of people and kind of prompted them to leave and protest. So quick reminder, Spotify is not the music industry, and they are also not streaming. They are one company that is part of a larger problematic ecosystem. And even though they're just one player, they often get blamed for the problems of the whole system. There's this thing in business called genericization, which is when one company kind of becomes the brand name for the whole service. So Kleenex is an example of that. You want a tissue, everyone says, give me a Kleenex. Spotify, in a similar way, has that same problem, but it's only about the bad sides of things. When people are pissed about low streaming payouts, when they're pissed about the demonetization, the devaluation, the commodification, the passive listening of music, they blame Spotify. Because again, Spotify has the benefit of being a tastemaker, first mover in the space, tons of users. So in a way, people say Spotify when what they really mean is streaming sucks. So to come back to the song G. Officer Krupke from West Side Story, one of the reasons I think it's a pertinent reference for this discussion is not only because not only are all these different authority figures diagnosing the problem in different ways and ultimately kind of like absolving themselves of responsibility to do anything about it. But one thing that kind of goes unaddressed in that song is that these kids aren't all bad. They are loyal to each other. They're street smart. They're quick-witted. They're funny. You know, they have good qualities too. And all of these authority figures are just looking at the negatives. So I think it's good to think about Spotify from that angle too. Pluses and minuses. Pros, cons, good and bad. So what is Spotify's actual guilt or fault in this industry? You know, what is their real dirty laundry? I think there's a few things, and artists are right to be pissed about these things. So the first thing I think is really bullshit is that a year or two ago, they changed the way they pay royalties. They said to artists, if you have a song with less than 1,000 streams per year, it's worthless. We're not going to pay you anything. Is that all that much money for one song, for that few streams? No, but when you add up all the many songs that fall under that category by, you know, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, probably millions of artists, you take all the royalties, small as they may be on an individual basis, add it up to probably hundreds of millions of dollars, and you say, we're not paying that to you. Well, guess what? Who is getting paid that money? It stays in the royalty pool, and it gets split amongst the people who are generating lots of revenue from Spotify. So massive artists, major labels, and yes, a middle class of artists who are doing pretty well who now get paid a little bit more. But essentially you're telling niche artists, local artists, or even artists who do pretty well but have songs in their catalog that don't get as much engagement as the rest of their songs, that those songs are worthless. They're basically saying like, hey, small artists, congrats for the effort, but you are an amateur football player. And in fact, they used that metaphor. Daniel Ek said, hey, you know, everyone wants to be like a rock star soccer player, but only a very few amount of people ever get to that place where it's a professional thing. And most people on the planet are amateurs. You know, they play for free. And he made that comparison to music that was already on his platform generating revenue. Their accounting system already worked in the fairer way of paying everyone for everything. You know, maybe not everything, but in a kind of a summary way, they were already paying. And then they actively put work into changing their accounting system to be less fair. They explained all this, number two, as artist-centric royalties. It sounds good, right? It's like, oh, we're like helping the people who already earn more so that middle class can be more supported. What they were really doing is reallocating all those funds upward. As I said, it was a kind of reverse Robin Hood move. We can't say what happened behind closed doors, but you can be pretty damn sure that the major labels who have equity in Spotify as well were crucial in this decision making. They used terms like serious artists for the ones who had lots of streaming activity, and people in the major label system use the words trash or merchants of garbage to describe the distributors of independent music and that sort of vast long tail of music that may be very, very good. If you're watching this, you know that there's plenty of good music that doesn't get a lot of engagement for any number of reasons. Lack of budget, lack of time to promote, lack of awareness. Maybe it's just brand new music. It hasn't caught on yet. There's a whole lot of reasons why something might not have streams besides its quality. Now, the label system and Spotify are telling you low streams, well, you're not a serious artist. If you're not a serious artist, you suck. There's also favoritism or selective ethics that get applied to catalogs. So, for instance, there's this threshold that got set for how much streaming fraud could happen for a particular song before it was kicked off the platform. Now, for a major label artist, they could have hundreds of millions of fake streams, but because they also have lots and lots of real streams, the fraud just gets mixed up and kind of like laundered in a way in this big package of streaming activity. And so, Spotify doesn't slap that artist on the wrist. Now, if an independent artist has most of its streaming activity as fraud, it bumps above that threshold and they get a slap on the wrist or they get kicked off the platform. If an independent artist has 1,000 streams and 900 of them are fraud, and a major label artist has 1 billion streams and 500 million of them are fraud, why does the major label artist get to skate through when the little artist is punished for those 900 fraudulent streams? That sometimes they may not have even been responsible for the fraud themselves. They may have gotten on a botted playlist. They may have sort of inadvertently hired an unscrupulous promoter. So they're getting punished for small amounts of fraud when big artists are not getting punished for big amounts of fraud because it just gets bundled into this massive amount of overall streams. Bullshit. Now, a third common grievance is executive pay and what happens with those vast fortunes that have been made from this platform. So with Daniel Ek, he has invested hundreds of millions of dollars of his own money that he made from Spotify in AI weapons technology. And not only that, he was appointed as chairman to that company. This has been a huge ethical red flag for tons of artists, and as I said, Deerhoof and many more leaving the platform. Now, when it comes to Daniel Ek's investment in AI weapons, I think I'm a little bit more of a pragmatist about this than the people who are really outraged. He says that this is a company that is devoted to the defense of democracies against autocracies who are also working on this technology, so better it be in the hands of, the good guys and the bad guys. And artists who are outraged are like, there's no good AI weapons expenditure. It's all an outrage. We don't care what your positioning or your marketing around this says. I get that. I also sort of think, well, if it wasn't him, it'd just be someone else. And it wasn't Spotify's money, really. This was his profit from Spotify that he put in his own investment. So it's not my place to tell him what to do with his own money. But of course, artists are like, it's not his own money. He made it off of our backs because they pay us shit. I understand that complaint. It's not one I would make myself necessarily, but I see their point. Now that's the ugly and the bad, but there are things that Spotify gets right, and I've got a few of them here I want to list. There are things that Spotify does just as well or better than competing platforms. The first thing is they pay out 70% of their revenue to rights holders. So that's labels, independent artists who own their own recordings, songwriters, publishers, and they have paid that 70% to rights holders for nearly their entire existence, despite the fact that for most of those years, they weren't even a profitable company. The second thing in their favor is that they did that despite having the challenge of having no other way to make money. Spotify is a rare audio-only company in a vast field of players who can treat their audio service, their streaming service, as a loss leader if they really need to. And what I mean by that is Apple Music. Apple sells devices. They get massive amounts of revenue from percentages on the App Store. They have all these ways of making money. So if they lose on Apple Music, that's fine because they just bundle it in for convenience with their iPhones. Amazon Music can lose money because Amazon itself basically supports the entire internet and they ship everything to everyone everywhere. They've got all these ways of making money. YouTube and Google, they are massive advertising engines. They make massive amounts of money on that. So if they needed to lose money on the music portion of YouTube Music, that would be fine for them. All of them have this competitive advantage of treating audio sort of as an afterthought when it comes to profit. Spotify had no such cushion. They were audio only from the beginning. At some point they added podcasts, another form of audio. And yes, lately they've been adding video stuff, but essentially they're an audio company still. And not only were they kind of first to the space of streaming, they also really did give artists more tools and more opportunities to shape their music's destiny on that platform. They could customize their profiles. They could have this sort of open third-party playlisting environment within which music could get surfaced by, independent music curators and get traction in all these interesting self-driven ways, which may get the attention of their algorithm, in which case their editorial playlists and their algorithmic playlists could start surfacing this music to more people. There's discovery mode, which has its pros and cons itself. If you opt in for discovery mode, you can get massive amounts of discovery. I have a song that's gotten hundreds of thousands of streams that it would not have gotten had I not opted for discovery mode. The downside is I give away 30% more of my royalties to Spotify. So they have this pool of songs that they can be like, hey, if we push these out and people like them, our customers will be happy and we'll make more money. When it comes down to that choice of me getting the reach versus the money, I would choose the reach every time. So discovery mode for me has been a benefit. Speaking of reach, Spotify has a massive user base. They've made a product that is convenient to use, people love, which means you do have access to tons of people on the planet. And lastly, it should not go unsaid that before Spotify came along, music monetization was going like this. We were in the age of massive piracy, and people were just getting really accustomed to not paying for music at all. Spotify kind of stopped the bleeding on that. They sort of put a baseline down and said, hey, this is where it stops. And from that point, the music industry has been doing better and better, bringing revenue back into the ecosystem of recorded music. Now, is it perfect? Is it great? No, I'm not saying that. But without them, who knows how much further that slide would have gone down into a world where people just got used to stealing everything. So Spotify, they are a flawed tool, but it still works for certain goals. And I think there's a way for artists to make peace with the trade-offs. There is no perfect answer here. Is Spotify a perfect company? No, not at all. The pay is crap. Their CEO is investing in weapons technology. I get all these complaints. At the same time, If you like Apple Music, just remember there are accusations that Apple benefits from forced labor. Amazon, I don't know, what can we complain about that? Like Jeff Bezos spent $50 million on his wedding. Any of these things you can have these like sort of tech bro complaints about. So in a way, it feels a little bit unfair to aim all of your anger at Spotify. And I also don't think quitting is necessarily the most strategic answer for your music because again, there's no blameless DSP. Now, your music isn't worthless no matter what Spotify says, no matter what the streaming ecosystem says. You can have massive amounts of reach and discovery availability for your catalog and bring people in through that worthless system and bring them closer to you in a way that your value can be exchanged for experiences and merch that those people will pay for. Your music's value is also not set by an algorithm. If one person heard your song and it improved their life, that is priceless no matter how many other people either ignored or never found your song. But of course, if you're going to keep your music on Spotify and use it for the potential discovery engine it can be, you definitely want to kind of learn that game and then use it to drive deeper engagement elsewhere. You want to get people off that platform onto your email and SMS list, onto your website, to your shows, to your merch store, all that sort of stuff. Build behind the scenes experiences that you can lead them through. Because if you think of your fan acquisition journey as a funnel, it's a lot of people at the top and few people down here. Spotify is great for feeding that top of funnel engagement. Don't discount it. So if you're wondering if you should pull your music from Spotify, we have a great decision tree I made. I'll put a link in the show notes. Basically, you take 2 or 3 minutes. It's pretty fun to use. You go through all these considerations. By the end, you'll know, should you stay or should you go? No matter which you choose, if you still want to have a sustainable and profitable music career with like less soul-crushing interactions with platforms and social platforms and trends and all this stuff, I hope you will stick with this Scratch Track podcast. Check out Demo, which is at musicdemo.org, and I'll see you in the next episode.